This essay was first published April 22nd, 2024. Dialogues of Life, Living, and Death. Angsty and unsettled politicians are saying that the country is having a conversation. Unlike those multi-billion-dollar aid packages, which are always said to be the true consensus of the people, Americans really are having one here. And it's a tough one to have. Baby genocide, a woman's right to bodily autonomy. Then a moderate chimes in, saying that we should have some compromises, like time limits on when the procedure can be done, or making sure their tax dollars don't go to funding it. This is the abortion question. While babies are being cut up inside the womb, the country has been cut up by talking about it. In my state of Arizona, the Supreme Court just ruled to uphold an 1864 law that criminalizes abortion in nearly every case. The sole exception is when a woman's life is at risk. There are no other exceptions, not even for victims of rape. Apparently, Democrats wish to allow access to abortion, for any reason, at any stage of gestation. Republicans are split, with plenty of them taking the side of the majority of Americans, who would allow abortions in the first trimester. I, too, am of 3 or 4 minds about the issue. We're certain of what death is, a straight flat line, but what exactly is life? I've never been convinced that a beating heart is the only thing that constitutes living. Remember the old phrase, life and limb? The dead have no need for food, medicine, or shelter, but you and I do. As for love, some of us more than others, but with the need for it mostly universal. Recently, I spoke with a mother I've known for a while on Facebook. We'll call her Mila. She's a single mom of 3 kids. I told Mila that the issue, once again, has become wedged inside my brain. Mila considers herself very pro-family. I'm a militant pro-lifer, she said. Procreation is very important. Our replacement rate is 2.1. We're far below that at 1.6. She asserts that people need to buckle up and make more babies. I offer a counter that misses the bigger point. Mass infertility is more likely due to all the endocrine disruptors. I then shared my frustration. I said that pro-lifers are weird because they're not only anti-abortion, but pro-procreation, but only until the baby gets outside the womb. There's a contradiction here somewhere, I'm positive. I'm obviously not the first to point out the hypocrisy of so-called pro-lifers. The term they use these days is pro-birther. We've all seen that meme of the ultrasound, juxtaposed with a fleshly pink newborn. Same child, different location. Indeed, and it's also the same child 20 years on, even if it's been abandoned, neglected, or abused. Tradcon fantasies notwithstanding, many humans have been conceived by careless people who had no intention of doing so. Conservatives prefer to call this a crisis pregnancy, which is a euphemism that's easier to say than unwanted or unplanned. If these pregnant women can't find help, then let their kids join the some 500,000 already in foster care. But the so-called pro-lifers must know that kids who go through the foster care system are much more likely to have a negative outcome. Depression, addiction, and violent tendencies, they say, are much more common amongst kids who have been shuffled from house to dorm. This is likely where we find the origins of disturbed, maladjusted, and violent adults. I can already hear the empathetic Christians. We're glad you weren't aborted, but we do wish you were dead now. Granting this, it would appear that the pro-life premise often leads to an anti-life conclusion. While one must recognize this as a morbid line of thought, it is still part of the conversation. After sharing it with Mila, she took umbrage. She's a peaceful and thoughtful parent who does not spank or circumcise or entrust her family's entire health to that of an allopath. If humanity does have a future, Mila will have done her part. If there was more social support for mothers, Mila said, I bet there would be fewer children being aborted or put up for adoption. And yet, a recent study by the Commonwealth Fund found that, quote, abortion restriction states also have fewer maternal care providers than states with abortion access, including a 32% lower ratio of obstetricians to births and a 59% lower ratio of certified nurse midwives to births. End quote. Then again, how serious can someone be if they use the degrading and unaesthetic term birthing person? That support, says Mila, is so fucking critical to the success of the mother if she ends up alone. Others might not sympathize with Mila's choices. The father of Mila's youngest, a boy not even 5 years of age, has all but disappeared. He has no part in their lives. Mila works, but she's also taken money from the state. Red-pilled men will call her a whore who chose badly. Women, I propose, find themselves in a hopeless predicament. They're supposed to do their duty to society and humanity by having kids, but only with the right man who will stick around long enough to make sure the child gets to adulthood. If that doesn't happen and they raise kids by themselves or gets on welfare, they're the scum of the earth. But they should never, in any circumstance, consider abortion. Here we find the four corners of a box, which a woman will never be able to find her way out of. Mila responds, I'm not trying to suggest that taxpayers just pay for all of the babies. If we have money for endless wars and sending billions to other countries, then we have the money to care for our own. This is a widely shared sentiment, and it's not unfair. Now I have a more serious counter. We really don't have the money. We don't even pay attention to the debt anymore. I don't either. I wonder who will cash in. The country is a carcass, with many vultures feasting on the morsels. Of course, speaking honestly, some of the blame falls on those lustful heathens who just won't keep their damn legs closed. A Guttmacher Institute study tells us that $21 billion a year go to supporting children who are not planned. I guess it's just my negative perspective, I said. While I'm happy that I'm not the only one who openly talks about their struggle with depression, between 2011 and 2022, 500,000 people committed suicide, I try not to bring it up at every turn, as I don't want it to be seen as a credential or badge. That's tacky and deceitful. It hasn't always been obvious, I tell Mila, that because I exist, that I ought to. I go on to explain that I've suffered depression for as long as I can remember. So I sympathize with those who have swallowed the black pill, or even those of the anti-natalist persuasion. The words suicidal pro-lifer seems contradictory, but maybe that's just me. I offer a scenario to Mila. Someone tells you, I suffer with depression and alcoholism. I've spent decades trying to justify my own existence. Would we say to that person, you should have kids? They might cheer you up? How about a more common example? Her kid's derelict dad. If someone like him were to tell me, I'm going to knock this woman up and then take off, give them nothing, would I encourage him to do so just simply to keep the birth rates afloat? Don't worry, I'll assure him, the taxpayer will be there. Indeed, I might not like the person who says I'm wrong for discouraging that man. We're not talking about hypotheticals here, as the numbers above would show. Who has the perfect answer? Only Christ knows, as his backhanded believers will tell us. As for the skeptics, we can only guess. Do we try to dissuade young folk from having kids? To get fixed or use birth control? Well, I thought we were supposed to encourage procreation. But, again, somehow, only under the perfect circumstances. And if we can't have those, then perhaps we should build a strong and sturdy safety net so as to ensure the mother and her child are well cared for. Who will pay for those ropes and anchors? Certainly not the Republican governor of South Dakota. The one thing I'm not willing to do, said Kristi Noem, is to directly subsidize child care for families. You see, that's not the government's job. And still, a couple years ago, South Dakota passed a law criminalizing practically all abortions. That is the government's job. So be ready to give that newborn over to the nurse. Slowly, this conversation is becoming more productive. Last November, when Ohio cemented the right to have an abortion, Senator Vance tweeted, "We need people to see us as the pro-life party, not just the anti-abortion party." Arizona's own Kari Lake is now saying similar things. If the pro-lifers want to win, they need to create a society, nay, a world, that is actually welcoming to another life. Those who mount their digital donkey and rage against the murder of the unborn will one day realize the nigh impossibility of that second goal. Yes, it's wrong to slice up and dismember a child, but the Black Pillar would point out that plenty of people are perfectly fine with many other forms of dismemberment. In my own travels, I've talked to many childless people who tell me, I would never want to bring a child into this fucked up world. Who could blame them? Who would ever want to bring an intelligent creature into a world filled with crosswearers who think teenage rape victims should be executed for seeking an abortion? Or, for that matter, a world that has trouble keeping track of its wars and despots and unspeakable forms of torture. In our modern dystopia, mindless consumerism, limitless surveillance, and chemical exposure make sure we're too dumb and wounded to take notice. Like me, my friend dreams of a world that's very different from this one. She thinks we'd be better off if we started moving out of big cities, into small communities, surrounded by people we can trust and rely upon. While that's a healthy prospect, they'll still be troubled by lustful adults. It's in our nature. At the very least, life is tough, and it's soon discovered that sex is the best painkiller. We oftentimes create life that we can't care for. They suffer, even if only a little, and they eventually have sex, thus unintentionally creating more lives. I'll call that Patton's theory of humanity continued. When humanity has been perfected, I say, people will only have sex when they intend to procreate. Even married couples won't have a consistent sex life, as the fear of unplanned kids will be too great to bear. That, I say, is when just keep your legs closed is taken seriously and practiced by all. Mila thinks that absurd. She's not wrong.